Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I have Mike Ricksecker with me today. Mike Ricksecker is the author of the best-selling A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People, and the historic paranormal books, Ghosts of Maryland, Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma, Campfire Tales, Midwest Ghostorian Case Files, and the Encounters with the Paranormal series. He has appeared on multiple television shows and programs as a paranormal historian, including Travel Channel's The Alaska Triangle, Discovery Plus's Fright Club, Animal Planet's The Haunted, Bio Channel's My Ghost Story, and RenTV's, in Russia, Mysteries of Mankind. Produces his own internet supernatural-based shows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, and is a producer and director of the docu-series The Shadow Dimension, available on several streaming platforms. On Tuesday nights, he hosts the Edge of the Rabbit Hole Livestream Show and also produces the Beyond the Shadows podcast. Haunted Road Media is also his own paranormal and supernatural book publishing and video production company, representing a number of paranormal writers, winning the award for excellent media in the paranormal field at the 2019 Shockfest Film Festival. Mike's historic paranormal articles have been published in the Baltimore Sun, Paranormal Underground magazine, and he previously wrote an Oklahoma City paranormal column for The Examiner, 2010 through 2014. His work has also been featured in The Oklahoman, the Frederick News Post, Marshall University's The Parthenon, and Louisiana State University's Civil War Book Review. He now hosts many of these articles along with informational videos and learning courses on the Connected Universe Portal website. A native of Cleveland, Ohio, Mike is a father of four and is an avid baseball fan. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Liz. I absolutely appreciate it.
This is going to be so much fun. I found you through Mark Anthony, getting an email from him. I interviewed him last month. He's super fun, but you were on the Dr. Pat and Mark Anthony show, The Psychic and the
Right.
Doc. That was a great conversation. Really sparked.
Yeah, it was. And Mark's a great guy. Yeah,
He really
we go
is.
back a little ways. Yeah.
He's fun. And we have something in common. So I too was woken up around 5th grade by a shadow figure beside my bed that raised its fists and hit me in the stomach around that time. So I want to jump right into your experience and all about shadow people. So why don't you share with us your childhood experiences and what led you to today?
Yeah, absolutely. My first significant paranormal experience, and I think I had a couple other smaller ones beforehand, but I was really young at the time. My first significant one was with a shadow person when I was about 8 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night and this tall, dark figure was standing in the corner of my bedroom. But of course, at that time, I had no idea about shadow people, and shadow beings, or whatever that you called it. I thought that there was an intruder in the house and it was about to kill me because that's what you're thinking about that age. Fortunately, I'm still alive to tell the tale. But it did, approach my bed, and I'm trying to scream. Nothing's coming out of my mouth because I'm just too frightened. And it leaned over my bed. I'm staring up into this just blank face. It's all dark. There's no eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing. Just complete blackness.
Mhm.
And then it took me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, so it did get physical with me. And then it ran off down the hall, and of all places, into a closet. By that time, I found my voice, found my legs, ran off screaming to my parents' bedroom. They tried to console me, tried to tell me that I had just had a bad dream, but I had been awake for this entire event.
Yeah. Similar answer from my parents. So shadow people. So you had this experience, and as you became an adult and you started to question it, what were some of the things that you came up with as explanations?
Yeah, a lot of different things because I got into doing paranormal investigations after a while. Had another incident when I was 13 years old with another shadow person, but very very different. Where we had moved into this new house. We'd moved from the home in Massachusetts to the house in Ohio, and I kept, I'm just putting things away in my bedroom, unpacking boxes, putting things away. And I kept seeing this figure in my doorway. And I turned and looked and he'd take off. And it was again dark in nature, but it was a little bit more translucent than the first kind that I had experienced. This never came into the room, never got physical, but it happened over and over and over again as I was unpacking boxes and putting things away. And so I ended up asking my mother about it a few days later. Now I'm 13 at the time, a little bit older. And apparently she thought I was a little bit more mature. And she said that she had seen this thing too. But she didn't seem very alarmed about it. So I was like, okay, on one hand, it's great that I got the affirmation that she had seen it. I'm not crazy. And because she didn't seem alarmed about it, I didn't get alarmed about it either. And I started getting playful with the things and started calling him Tom. So like peeping Tom because he'd peep into my bedroom. So anytime I'd see him, I'd say, "Hey, Tommy, take off." So, very, very different than that first physical scary experience when I was 8. So as I got older and I, started investigating the paranormal, I started questioning, okay, why was it that I had these two different, very different experiences with these things? A lot of people that I'd been talking to also had a varying amount of different experiences. I started seeing these things on paranormal investigations as well. And the settings again were very, very different. So, it led me down the road of okay, these shadow entities, these shadow beings, these shadow people are not all just one singular thing. They are a variety of different things.
Interesting. Can you unwrap that a little bit more? Because when you hear shadow people and you're watching TV, Travel Channel and History Channel and all these different shows, they're saying that they're malevolent, that they're bad or evil or not good.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to again take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because it's television, so the
Yeah.
scarier the better. But
Right.
I have been on several television shows, and we did have one, way back in the day, 10 years ago, on The Haunted, where that was a red-eyed shadow entity that was certainly malevolent and nefarious, and was doing harm to the girl. She was an adult daughter of the house. So yes, there are ones that are, evil, nasty, and nefarious, but not all of them are. There again, there are a variety of different types of shadow entities, and it's going to sound very simplistic, but the way I break it down is, some humans are good, some humans are bad, some shadow entities are good, some shadow entities are bad. It just depends on what exactly they are, what their agenda is. Some of these are just human spirits that can't fully manifest as an apparition. They come off as a shadow. And so I'm not going to sit there and say somebody's Aunt Jane is evil. But then you do get some of the nasty ones as well. Some of them are also, ETs, extraterrestrials, and and those have a variety of different agendas as well. So it just depends on who this particular person or shadow entity is.
Have you ever gotten any of them to communicate with you?
Um, it's a question I get a lot. Do they communicate? Do they have voices? Just the physicality of them, they don't have a mouth, they don't have vocal cords, they're a shadow, but they tend to communicate with people through telepathy. Now I haven't I would love to sit there and have a one-on-one conversation with a shadow entity and just ask, okay, who exactly are you? And on paranormal investigations, when we've seen shadows, sometimes we get those EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, where we do get responses. And even with that red-eyed entity that was evil and nefarious, we were trying to deduce, okay, what exactly is this thing? Is this one of the questions with that particular case was, are we interacting with the former homeowner's father who had committed suicide in that house? And so as we were asking those questions, we did get some responses back, presumably from the shadow entity, and stating that no, he was not this guy, he was something else.
Interesting. So, what's the difference or similarities between a shadow person and a ghost?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are some similarities because, like I said before, some of these shadow entities that we experience, that we witness, are just human spirits that can't fully manifest. And with ghosts, we're talking about an apparition that is a human spirit that we're able to see fully formed with our eyes. But even with that, some of them may be what we would call a residual haunt. So it's just a playback of some sort of event that's happened, and we see an apparition of that. So it's when we go down this rabbit hole, it takes an amount of investigative work to deduce, okay, what exactly are we experiencing? Or is this an intelligent haunt? Is this something residual? And intelligent is something that, like a human spirit, is they're actually, interacting with you, where residual, again, is just like a playback of something. And with a shadow entity, if it is a human spirit, very similar to what we would call an intelligent haunt. It just looks a little bit different. And I've actually, had on occasion in which actually saw uh, it was an apparition of a little girl that actually morphed out of rolling black smoke. So this particular spirit had started off as a shadow, and as it came closer to us, it was coming down the hallway of an old hotel. It actually turned into the apparition of a little girl and stopped right by this doorway to a room in which many people had reported, seeing a spirit of a little girl in. So sometimes they can be one and the same,
Hmm.
just a different form. And then other times, if we're talking like an interdimensional being that's a shadow or an extraterrestrial or even something that's demonic, then we're starting to talk about something that's a little bit different that may take on the shadowy form of a bipedal form that may have arms, legs. Some of these things wear hats and cloaks and all that. So kind of takes on the look of a human, but still is not human.
Hmm. Interesting. I want to go to that residual haunt because my house in Paulsbo, over 10 years ago, I was living in Paulsbo and we had a ghost. I named him Bob, right? My little one, one of my little ones could see him and was like,
Mhm.
Mommy, who's that guy in the hallway? But I could just feel his presence, right? And then when I was a little girl, waking up in the middle of the night when my sister and I shared a room, there was a full blown apparition of a woman, all white, looking out the window and actually like communicated with me, turned her head and was like, shh, went back and looking out the window, right? So how have you um figured out how to separate like what is residual energy, what is a loop, and what is the full-blown apparition or spirit? When do you know you're dealing with spirit?
Yeah, well, if it's turning and looking at you and saying "shh" like that, and having a actual intelligent interaction with you, then it's definitely not residual. That would be a residual haunt. But you hear these stories of like at old forts and things like that, where there's a soldier that walks by the same time every night, every month, or the lady in white who always appears at the top of the stairs at the exact same time. That those
Mm,
are residual haunts. Those are on some sort of playback. We don't exactly know what kicks them off, but when people start reporting the same exact thing happening over and over and over again, then that's what we would deem residual.
interesting. Okay. And then I'm going to wind it back a little bit further because you said ET and
Mhm.
shadow person. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between extraterrestrial experiences and experiences that people have with shadow entities. A lot of these reports, people are waking up in the middle of the night. They see some sort of form in their room. Some people will say, a shadow entity. Some people will say extraterrestrial. In a lot of these cases, not all, but a lot of these cases, people are experiencing sleep paralysis, whether it's ET or shadow. There may be some sort of physical interaction. Again, but same thing between each. So we see a lot of similarities between these two different types of phenomena. In some cases, they almost appear to be the exact same thing. A great story that I like to tell in this regard is with Albert K. Bender. Now, he was an individual back in the day, 1950s, in which he founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau during the big UFO flap of 1952. And this organization blew up immediately. It went international right away, overseas in the UK and Australia. And remember, this is back in the day when they didn't have the social media and the internet. They had to, with snail mail, writing letters, and and you had the telephone, but that was back when you had those massive long distance charges. So you weren't just, readily calling the UK all the time. So for him to be able to blow this thing up internationally within a year was phenomenal. They had all kinds of meetings and newsletters and all these things going on. And then all of a sudden, a year later in 1953, he just shut it down just like that. and nobody understood why. There was a author and publisher at the time, Gray Barker, who tried to get the story out of him. Only got some scant little details as to why he shut this down. And it wasn't until the 1960s that through Gray Barker, Albert Bender published a book called Flying Saucers and the Three Men, revealing why he had shut down the International Flying Saucer Bureau and why he had kept silent on it for so long. And what had happened to him is he was visited in the night by three shadowy entities wearing hats with glowing eyes that materialized into his room and told him he needed to stop his research on flying saucers. Now, I listened to this story and I immediately think these are shadow beings. These are the hat wearing shadow entities, the hat man that everybody talks about. Albert Bender thought that these were extraterrestrials that were telling him to stop, doing his research on them. They told him that they were there for 15 years and that he could talk about it after they were gone. He believed that they were harvesting resources from the water in Antarctica. Other people, like conspiracy theorists, would take a look at that story and say, "Well, these are the men in black." So it's interesting to me how through each different lens, paranormal, ET, conspiracy theorists, we have a different view of what these entities actually are.
Mhm. Gosh, I could totally see, conspiracy theories going with astral projection, government intervention, projecting, remote viewing into a room or something
Right.
like that for control. Totally. Gosh, interesting. Any other information you have about extraterrestrials on any of your paranormal investigations?
Sometimes these things go hand in hand. So sometimes these locations that we investigate that are haunted also see significant UFO activity. One particular location, the house known as the Conjuring House, the house in Rhode Island that the movie The Conjuring was based off of, extremely haunted house. From my experiences there and the research that I've done there, and I feature this in my docu-series, The Shadow Dimension. There is significant vortex and portal activity that's going on there. They basically have this room down in the basement. They call it the well room. It's an open well with water. The walls are made of limestone. They're capped with granite blocks. So it's like this perfect little power plant down there creating all this energy. So they have all these, hauntings. They have time slips there. And they also have a lot of UFO sightings out there as well. So it may be drawn to that energy that's there.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about these energetic portals and sites around our country or the world that you've
Mhm.
investigated? That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They're all over the world. People will the common term is ley lines. And basically what the ley is all those geographic spots around the globe that line up in a line. And that creates the ley. But basically the reason why they're all lined up is because the ancients knew to build their temples, or in modern times they started building churches and cathedrals on top of the old temples, because they knew that these were sites that had that earth energy to provide healing. They could enter altered states of consciousness. They could open up portals. People talk about stargates. So we're talking like some of these locations like Stonehenge and those old ancient sites of power like that, or the pyramids. Couple weeks ago, I was actually inside the Great Pyramid at Giza, and you feel that energy within there, which is phenomenal. When I was on the show, The Alaska Triangle, that was a big feature of that show that we talked about was the energy up there in Alaska that's powering the kind of quote unquote triangle and creating all of this activity, like the missing airplanes that may be disappearing into portals, the paranormal activity that's up there, the UFO sightings, all these different strange creatures that are seen up there, the missing ships and airplanes, that it's that energy that's spawning off all of this activity.
Wow. That's exciting. Do you want to share a little snippet about your visit to the Pyramid of Giza?
Oh, it was
That's
phenomenal. Yeah,
exciting.
I spent 2 weeks in Egypt and absolutely love it. It's surreal being back because it's, I'm thinking back and I'm seeing the photos and it's like, was I really there? But I was. We had special access on the summer solstice from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. The tour that we were on was called Return of the Kepler Cycle. So basically, we were honoring the start of the new sun cycles, which starts with the Kepler, basically the representation of the dung beetle. That's what they called it. It was a
Awesome.
Kepler. And we were there, exclusive access for 2 hours, just our little group inside the Great Pyramid, while we were getting fed that energy from the new cycle. And we got access down to the subterranean chamber. Spent a lot of time in the king's chamber, and just we were it's kind of funny, because there was an archaeologist that was there, the guy that basically let us in. And there are certain things that he didn't want us doing, and then he'd kind of like turn his back and walk into a different room. We'd go ahead and do that stuff. So we were doing some different resonance tests. And the pyramid is tuned to the key of F sharp, as is the earth. And so as we were doing some different meditations and things like that, and basically humming to the key of F sharp, you could feel that energy coursing through you. It was absolutely amazing.
God, I bet that would be heaven for me. What a fantastic experience. I'm jealous.
Yeah, it really was fantastic. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna wheel it back to unfortunately shadow people again. So, in my business, I'm an advanced intuitive healer, right? So I
Mhm.
see attachments occasionally on people. So, do you see any similarity or anything when it comes to like the difference between a shadow person and an attachment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get asked if shadow entities will attach themselves to people. And it's really kind of a mixed bag, because I've heard stories and accounts of shadows following somebody from one location to another, but then I've heard the opposite as well, where they didn't. Case in point, there was a family that they had three girls, and they all slept in the same bedroom. And not every night, but many nights, there'd be a hat wearing shadow entity that would come into the room at night and stand at the foot of the bed of the one girl, and it would just stand there and stare at her. It wouldn't actually do anything. The other two girls would be looking on, watching this happening, many times. Well, they moved from that house and never saw that hat wearing shadow entity again. So it does make you wonder, perhaps that shadow entity was attached to the house, didn't actually have an attachment to the girl. Maybe was just curious as to, okay, who's the girl sleeping in the bed.
Mm,
So if not the person, is it the location? And that's where investigative work comes into play.
interesting. Did yours move houses with you, or did you ever dream about it or anything like that?
The first one, it was just a one-off. It was just the one experience, where it came into my room, physically interacted with me, and was gone. I never saw that particular one again. The second one, when I moved into that house, was putting things away and saw it in the doorway. That one hung around for about 3 or 4 months, and then the activity subsided. So I kind of chalked that up to something that was there, was curious about the new family that was moving in, deemed we were okay, and then moved on. So if there was an attachment there, I would think it was more to the house and not us.
Interesting. On your investigations, had you ever had anybody have that happen to them, follow locations or dream about it or anything like that?
Yeah, the Monster in the Closet case, that was on The Haunted, that was in Edmond, Oklahoma. This red eye shadow entity I mentioned earlier. That one was, I mean, it was terrorizing her, it was terrorizing the cat. Other people in the family saw it. Yeah, she would see it in her dreams. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, be standing in her closet with the red eyes, which is why they called it Monster in the Closet, that particular episode. So, but that one was, again, more nefarious in nature. That one was actually, we brought in a demonologist, Carl Johnson, on that case, and he actually did deem that one demonic. It's the only demonic case that I've worked on, and that's something I get asked a lot. Are these things demonic? And it's like, well, of all the years that I've been doing this, that's the one case. And Carl's a good friend of mine, and just talking with him, and we've been in touch with the family. Nothing's happened since that time. We cleansed the house,
Oh,
and
nice.
just talking with him, it's like, okay, Carl, you've been doing this for 50 years, and you get called out onto a lot of cases all the time. When was your last actual demonic case, case that you deem demonic. And he said, Mike, it was that one 10 years ago that we did together for The Haunted. So, an actual demonic case is few and far between. But that doesn't mean that some of these things are, nasty and nefarious. You could have a nasty human spirit, kind of one of those. They were a jerk in life, they're a jerk in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your question, you know, they can get into your head, they can get into your dreams. They can follow you around if they so choose. These things have free will, just like we do.
Hmm. Interesting. Kind of good news though that he had only had one, 10 years prior. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like yeah, he's a demonologist. He gets called out on cases all the time and, over and over and over again. He'll just say, "Okay, this one's a residual haunt. This one's a, just a human spirit. Okay, this one's nasty. But, again, it's just human." So he has 50 years of experience on this and yeah, only a handful that are actually demonic.
Wow. In your book, you also talk about interdimensional entities. You want to talk
Mhm.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's what I think like a kind of quote unquote true shadow person is something that's crossed from another plane of existence into ours. And I have a great little story that I like to tell with this.
Sure.
I was doing an investigation at a restaurant called Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. This was some years ago, and we had really just finished up. A couple of guys were up in the bar area, and a couple of others were out in the front dining room area. And I decided to do a last photo sweep of the restaurant before we left. And so I'm walking through the main door of the kitchen, and all of a sudden, as I walk in, I just see this quick shadow dart across the room. It was just what I would call a wisp. It was very translucent, very fast. It was kind of tall and narrow. You could hardly tell a form, but there it was, and it darted across the room. And you heard this boom, this slam of it into the door that was on the sidewall. And this was just like a flimsy little metal door that waiters and waitresses would use to carry large trays of food through. You could like tap it with your finger and the thing would open, except the door didn't open, even though you heard the slam of the thing. So
Wow.
I called out to the others. Yeah, it was crazy. I called out to the others. Hey, did you guys hear that? And they're like, yeah, yeah, we heard that. So I described to them what happened, and they thought it was fascinating. But all of a sudden, I'm thinking, wait a second, are these guys messing with me? Did they throw something at the door? And I asked them, did you guys throw something at the door? They're like, no, we didn't throw anything at the door. I actually walked out the door. I'm looking around on the ground. There's nothing there. Even if they had thrown something at the door, it would have moved. It was just like this flimsy little door. And so, the big question for me was, okay, what in the world did I just witness? What did I see? And, after research and further investigation, this is what I came up with is that, when I entered that room, when I walked through that main door, that perhaps this thing that was on another plane of existence, it was coming here interdimensionally somehow, that perhaps it saw me as a shadow, perhaps it saw me as a ghost. I have no idea, but I scared it because that thing took off. And perhaps on its plane of existence, in its dimension, it blew right through that door. That door opened wide and it ran off into the dining room area, but I didn't see it because I'm on a different plane of existence. However, because sound works on a different frequency, I was able to hear that from one dimension to another. And we've used that idea of sound traveling interdimensionally because it's on a different frequency. When we were doing the Alaska Triangle and talking about some of these different portals and disappearances, that we could still hear sounds coming back through those portals. So um, that's that's kind of like a big section of my book and a big point that I like to make there about these interdimensional shadow entities.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Do you have a couple more short stories you can share with us?
I mean, I have quite a few
I
stories.
bet.
Um, yeah, I mean, one that people kind of tend to, I guess, enjoy because they'll ask me, does any of this stuff scare you? What's a scary investigation that you've been on? And it's when I'm on a paranormal investigation, I don't really get scared. I'm in that mode of I'm curious, I'm researching, I want to know what's going on. If there's something happening, I'm actually, going toward it. I'm not running from it. You see a lot of these like television shows where something spooks them and they go running off or whatever. I'm the opposite. I'm running toward it. But all that said, there was this one particular incident that happened. I was not on a paranormal investigation, but something paranormal was happening. And this happened down in Salisbury, Maryland. And I was down there for something personal. I was basically, talking a friend of mine off of a ledge, and she had driven down to her old childhood home, which was now abandoned, and had parked her SUV back behind this place. And I drove down there, parked in the driveway. It was very dark down there. Really no street lights. And the backyard was even darker because there were these woods that were back behind the house. And so I walked from my car and got into her SUV and kind of, sitting there talking for a while. But then all of a sudden, I started noticing through the side mirror these short little shadow entities that were kind of creeping up toward the trees in the woods behind us. And there were kind of more of them and more of them starting to gather. And she was involved a bit in the paranormal too. And she, noticed that I was noticing something and said, You've seen something, haven't you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I see something." I told her what was going on, and we kept talking for a little bit. But then one of these shadow entities, I saw through the side mirror again, kind of approached the back of her SUV. And so this was the moment that I was like, I think it's time to go. It it's not like, I don't wanna say as, I was scared or anything like that, but I was not prepared for this situation at all. It was,
Mhm.
there for something very personal. This stuff starts happening, and it was dark and pretty creepy back there. It was just like, it's we need to go. And she agreed, "Okay, let's go ahead and go." So, I get out of her SUV, I'm looking around. I still see the shadow entities, around the trees, but I did not see the one that had approached, her car. So I started walking back to my car in the driveway and keep kind of peering back, see if any of these things are following me. And they're around the tree trunks. But I look up in the tree top, and I saw this really bizarre white silky thing kind of moving through the treetops. And the only way to describe it was like a living spider web because it was just kind of slinking through the trees like that. And so I got in the car and we took off and we met up somewhere else. So that one was pretty bizarre.
Wow, that is bizarre. And one of my old haunts. So, Salisbury, Maryland, I'm very familiar
Mhm.
with. I grew up in Cambridge, Maryland, Dorchester County. It's kind of fun to hear you tell a story about Maryland. That's fun. And that is creepy. A bunch of little shadow people around a tree and then a
Yep.
wispy thing. Yeah, no fun. I think I would have chosen to leave as well, not knowing what was going on or not being prepared. You also wrote a book about Maryland, which is super
Yeah.
fun. And all of my friends in Maryland will totally remember like Big Liz pulling up
Mhm.
on the DeCourcy Bridge and flashing the lights 3 times and honking the horn 3 times to try to get Big Liz to come to the car or truck, when you're a teenager. Do you have any other
Right.
fun stories from your book that you can share about Maryland? From your
From Maryland,
yeah, from your Ghosts of
yeah,
Maryland
I mean, I
book?
had yeah, Ghost of Maryland. That was that was actually my first paranormal book. I was living in Frederick, Maryland at the time, and it was a book that kind of fell into my lap. I was actually writing detective fiction at the time, but I had written some paranormal short stories, and it always had an interest in the paranormal. And my editor from that book approached me and said, "I know you write fiction, but you're in Maryland, and we're looking to expand our line of paranormal books. Would you be interested?" I was like, "Yeah, of
Cool.
course." But probably the most interesting thing that happened to me while I was researching that book, and there's Maryland, extremely haunted state, and yet there's so much history there that kind of plays into all these hauntings.
Mhm.
But the one that was really interesting for me, because I had a personal experience with that, was the Samuel Mudd House.
Mm.
And I've been there several times, but the first time that I went there was for research on this book, and did the whole tour, talked with the docents, took a lot of photos, got home, and then all of a sudden, all my photos were gone. So I was like,
Wow.
"What in the world happened?" This was like a recurring theme down there. Like I said, I've been there several times. It seems like I always ended up having some sort of technical issue going down there. So I ended up going back down there, and apparently, I traveled back on a day that they were closed, not knowing that they were closed that day. So pulled up to the gate, everything's locked up, and I was like, oh, okay, this is lousy because it was a good hour and a half drive, I think, for me to get down there. And so I was like, "Oh, I'll take some photos here from the gate. I'm taking some photos, and all of a sudden, truck pulls up, and it's one of the docents, and he tells me that well, he's opening the place up for a private viewing, but he would allow me to go up there and take my photo. So I got very lucky. And so I'm following him through the house, taking photos and asking him questions about things that he's experienced within the house. And he's telling me some different stories. And one of those was the the bedroom in which John Wilkes Booth had slept in. That the bed there, many mornings they'll go up and there's an impression in the bed as if somebody had been sleeping there. And
Wow.
so he's telling me this story as we're heading upstairs and going to that room. And he goes into the bedroom, walks past the bed, starts opening up the shades. And I look down at the bed and I'm like, you mean an impression like this? Because there it is, the bed impression as if somebody had been sleeping there that he had just been talking about. And it was funny because he suddenly got very, very upset. And he's like, see, this is what I'm talking about. We have to fix this all the time, make it look good for the public. And he starts making a move for the bed. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Can I take a photo first? and so,
Right?
so I snap off a couple of photos and he fixes it up and makes it presentable and all that. So I was very fortunate that I was able to actually experience this story that they tell and actually get a photo because they always fix this thing up in the morning so it can look good for the public. So not too many people actually get that photo.
Wow, that is amazing. God, so interesting. Did you ever venture down the Eastern Shore into Cambridge or any other spots and have any fun stories from High
Um,
Street or anything like that? One of the most haunted streets in Maryland.
yeah, I didn't really get to Cambridge, unfortunately. I spent some time in St. Michael's.
I used to work
So
there.
okay, yeah. Of course, everybody goes out to Ocean City, but
Oh,
yeah. um, yeah, a lot of the stories that I cover, I mean, it's all throughout the state, kind of scattered throughout. I have a big section in there on Frederick, Maryland, because I was actually living there. It's a very historic town.
yeah.
Of course, Baltimore, Inner Harbor, all that stuff. So I got around a little bit, but unfortunately, I did not spend time in Cambridge.
Bummer. You'll have to go back and investigate. That's a crazy street.
Yes, yes.
You also wrote one from Oklahoma, where you're from. Do you want to share a story or two from there?
Yeah, I spent 3 years out in Oklahoma. Yeah, I kinda shared one there about, Johnny V's and Muskogee, but
Mhm.
there's also there's a church out there, old abandoned church called Black Bear Church, and this is what when I was on my ghost story, the story that they featured there, they called it Church of Darkness, and it's a really interesting location. It's way out in the middle of nowhere, off of a couple of dirt roads. I mean, there's one time we went out there and there's a herd of cows that's walking down the road, and they're cutting in front of the cars. It was kind of crazy. So that's how far out there it was. Um, and it was really kind of an interesting location because you had the church and then the cemetery that was right across from the dirt road. And we always found that the church actually had a much more lighter, energetic feel to it than the church. The church was a lot darker. And there are a lot of interesting legends and local folklore about that particular church. One of those was the story of this kind of quote unquote crawler shadow entity that was there at that church. And this thing was supposed to have been conjured up by some people practicing the occult that after the church had become abandoned, it started being frequented, by kids partying and then this whatever occult group that was out there. And so they were conjured this thing up, as well as all these little shadow minions that were supposed to follow this thing. And the story was is that the crawler's domain was the church, and the shadow minions would come up to the windows of the church and peer in, but never would actually go inside. So, but
Hmm.
and we would hear the stories, but we hadn't experienced those things while we were there until one particular night. And we did find, we did find, I guess you could say, some evidence of maybe ritualistic work going on there because there's this one
Mhm.
room in the back of the church You have to keep in mind this place like had no roof. Everything was wide open. It was deteriorating heavily. But the one back room, there was this pedestal that was built out of brick and it had a cement slab on top. And we had found scorch marks on top of there, and some burnt little bones or whatever that maybe something was going on back there. Somebody could have just been heating up their Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever. We don't know because we weren't there to witness this. But it's like
Right.
if they were doing something like that, this would have been the spot. But one particular night that we were out there, we were doing just kind of basic investigation EVP session down in the basement area of the church. And all of a sudden we noticed through one of the windows this kind of shadowy thing slip inside. And we're continuing to do our little investigation, and then this shadow started circling us like around the walls, up on the ceiling, and it was fast. And you could kind of see a flurry of like arms and legs, very long and spindly. And at some point, they hit the floor because this plastic bottle went flying, hit the railing that led down the stairs. Heard the bang of the metal. Our electronic equipment was going crazy. Just there was all kinds of static and things like that going on. Now this is out in the middle of nowhere. We keep our cell phones turned off when we're doing investigations, but yet on all of our recording equipment, there's all this crazy static while this is going on. And then, basically, we had a psychic medium that was with us. She's like, this is the crawler. This is what is here. Let's sing some hymns. Let's say some prayers. Let's lighten the atmosphere to get this thing out of here. And so we did that, and this thing slipped back out the window from whence it came. So we got to experience the crawler. We didn't see the little shadow minions, but that was definitely the crawler.
Wow, that's exciting. That's interesting. The tools that she used to be able to get it to go. I like that.
Well, yeah, and I'm a firm believer in intention and putting forth your energy. I always believe as a paranormal investigator, we use a lot of different tools, cameras, audio recorders, different meters and things like that. But I believe your best tool is your body.
Right. Besides your own intuition, what's your favorite tool to work with on your investigations?
Yeah. Besides the body, yeah, but well, two things, camera and digital audio recorder. Yeah, I like to document, and it's very hard to get things on camera. We take hours and hours worth of video, and snap thousands of photos, and very rarely do we get anything. On occasion, we do, which is great. Um, but I mean, there's a story to tell, and so whether that's our adventures, or we're relating the story of whoever had once been there, the people who have been forgotten to time, these different ghosts and spirits that are there.
Mhm.
So certainly the camera, and then the digital audio recorder for for capturing the EVPs and trying to communicate with these different entities, and hopefully we've gotten some sort of audio back.
Cool. Are you doing any work on your paranormal investigations where when you do run into a spirit that's kind of stuck, are you doing anything to help it move on or encourage it to pass
you
over?
know You know, I get asked that a lot, and to me, it's at the discretion of the spirit. And this is the story that I like to relate to with that. When my grandfather passed away, uh, this was 10 years ago now. Uh,
Sorry.
yeah, he used to visit many members of the family. He'd visit me, you know, my parents, all kinds of people within the family, aunts, uncles, what have you. He did that for a number of years, and he'd visit my grandmother very, very often. A lot of people witnessed her interacting with him, and when she passed, apparently they went together because we didn't see hide nor hair of either one of them after she had passed. So he had been here on Earth, still lingering around, visiting people until she passed, and they went off together. So
Wow.
I would have been very upset if somebody would have come along and been like, we're going to pass over your grandfather. Or if, he was transient moving from one place to another and they encountered him and, passed him over. I would have been upset by that, as would have, especially my grandmother. So I won't do that unless it's, called for by the spirit. If the spirit wants help to do that, okay, we'll work to do that, and we've done that before. And then I'll do, of course, the cleansings from time to time. That's what we did in the Edmund case with the red-eyed entity. If that's something that the family of the home wants or needs done, then we'll go ahead and do that too.
Awesome. What advice would you give somebody who is experiencing a haunting?
Well, it kind of depends on the particular haunting, because there can be ones that are just, rather benign. They're there, they're in the house, walking around. They're not really interactive or doing anything. And then of course there are ones that are a little bit more, nefarious in nature and that are very disruptive. Some people, live quite harmoniously with their spirits.
Hmm.
There's a friend of mine some years ago that uh, he had a they were a, the previous they were previous tenants of his home, and they were a gay couple that had stayed in the house, and the one apparently was very mischievous, and so he'd get very playful. And so he worked out a working agreement with this couple that was still in the house. Like, you guys can be here, you can hang out. Just you, the one in particular, need to stop being so mischievous and moving things around and all that. So he came to a working agreement with them. So that can happen. But then there are others that again are very disruptive, and you may need some other intervention. So um, you know, communicate with them. I am There are some people out there that will say, don't communicate with the spirits that are, within your home. That'll invite all these other things to happen. It's like, well, you're not going to settle your issue that you may have with them if you don't actually open up that communication, because it may just be a matter of saying, hey, calm it down over here, and then it'll be fine. Um, then on the other hand, sure, that may open up something more. And if that happens, that's when you start bringing in other people to kind of help you. Okay, we need to get these people to, move out of here.
Right. Cool. That's good advice. Let's go back to your most current book, The Shadow People again. Is there
Mhm.
anything that you would like people to know that we haven't discussed about the shadow people?
I mean, there's a lot within that book, A Walk in the Shadows, and I break it into several different parts. The first part is all about like the different types of shadow entities, basically by physical description. So you have the humanoid figures, the hat people, the hooded figures, mists, wisps, the crawler that we talked about, all those different types. The second part is on sleep paralysis, because people experience that quite often. Of course, not all the time, but quite often with witnessing these shadow entities, especially at night. And
Mhm.
so we break that down and get into why that happens, because sleep paralysis is a real biological phenomenon, and how it relates or even may not relate to shadow entities. I also have a section in there on the history of shadow beings. So we get into like ancient Sumer, ancient Egypt, and a lot of different cultures. Basically, cultures from all over the world for millennia have been talking about this phenomenon. They will call it something different. They might have some legend and lore surrounding it, but they're all describing the same thing happening, which is fascinating. Next part of the book gets into interdimensional shadows, time travelers. If we're in a simulated universe, what a shadow entity may be. All these different other types of esoteric topics. And then the last part of the book is on the darker stuff. Are they all evil? And that those sorts of questions.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have the Shadow Dimension docu-series, which is kind of the complement to all of this, where we're going to locations like the Conjuring House, Mineral Springs Hotel, and researching this phenomena, how it may relate to portal and vortex activity, and kind of trying to get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, that's really fun. How can people find the Shadow Dimension docuseries?
Yeah, you can go to shadowdimension.com. You can watch the trailer out there. The extended preview has the links there to the platforms that it's currently running on, which is Tubi TV, which is a free platform, so you can watch it out there for free. You can also find it on Vimeo, Cosm, and Zuzu is a Canadian streaming platform that's running on right now.
Great. And I want to wind it back to sleep paralysis because a lot of
Mhm.
people experience this and people talk about it in a whole bunch of different circumstances. Can you unwrap that a little bit for our guests? I mean, for our
Yeah,
listeners?
absolutely. Yeah, because that's a big question
Mhm.
that I get is about sleep paralysis. Because people will wake up in the middle of the night, they'll see the shadow person standing there, and they'll have the sleep paralysis going on, get extremely frightened, and a lot of people believe that the shadow entity is making them paralyzed. So here's the thing. Uh, Sleep paralysis, like I said, is a real biological phenomenon. It is something that your body will do at night to prevent you from acting out your dreams. So something that really happens. I've experienced real sleep paralysis a couple of different times, uh, but a little bit differently than most people experience it. Most people experience it where they wake up where they wake up and their body's paralyzed. I had it the exact opposite, where my body just shut down and my brain was still awake, which was really scary because I was at work at the time, and I was it was during my Air Force days, and you do not want to get caught sleeping on the job in the military. It's not a good idea. So, um, what I ended up doing was just kind of tried to wiggle a toe first and see if I could get that going. Because basically, what's going on is I can hear everything that's going on around me. My brain was totally awake, but my body had just shut down because I was so exhausted. And so, I got a toe going, and then another, and then the foot, and then kind of slowly worked up my body until I could finally wake up my brain. So it's definitely very scary, and that's happened to me a few times. So. Um, but most people will experience it the other way at night.
Mhm.
And this is what I have an issue with when it comes to the medical community is what they'll say is that when it comes to these shadow entities is that they are a hallucination of our dream when we're waking up and experiencing this sleep paralysis. Well, people see shadow entities in a variety of different settings. Most of my experiences, I've only had one related to sleep. That was the very first one in which I, was 8 years old, woke up and saw the thing, and I wasn't even paralyzed at the time. My mouth opened up, even though nothing came out. I was just terrified.
Mhm.
My arms crossed. I turned my head as I watched the thing run down the hall, so I didn't have the sleep paralysis. And every other time I've seen a shadow person, I've been wide awake walking around, and a lot of people they will see these things just in their everyday lives, daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. So it's not just waking up in the middle of the night. But for those that do wake up in the middle of the night and see this thing standing in their room, in the corner, at the edge of the bed, at the foot of the bed, um, we dream about a lot of different things. So when they say that this is a hallucination playing out from our dream, it these people are seeing a figure standing in the room, but we dream about all kinds of different stuff. We could be dreaming about cars or airplanes, trees, bushes, trains, whatever. But none of those appear in our rooms. They People always report seeing this figure standing there. Um, and so here's what I think is going on. So, like I said, sleep paralysis, a real biological phenomenon. I believe, which I totally believe, and a shadow entity is a real paranormal phenomenon. And I think that just happen to be happening at the same time. But here's what's going on. And anybody who's had small children can relate to this, where child wakes up in the middle of the night and they come up to your bed, wake you up because, they had a bad dream, need a drink of water, have to go to the bathroom, whatever it is. And a lot of times they'll, tap you on the shoulder or shake you awake or whatever, but sometimes they don't. And my youngest son, Cameron, was notorious for this, where suddenly I would just wake up and be like, oh my God, Cameron, what are you doing? Because he would just be standing there at the edge of the bed,
Mhm.
staring down at me. It's like, whoa, okay. It's kind of creepy. Um, but but he would do that sometimes. And he would say, "Oh, I had a bad dream. You drink water, whatever. Okay, we'll go ahead and take care of it." But what is it that woke me up? Because he didn't touch me. It was just him standing there at the edge of the bed staring at me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was his presence, his personal energy. We all have personal toroidal field of energy that surrounds us that extends out several feet. So when his energy crossed into mine, I was able to feel that. And that's what woke me up. Well, I believe that's what's also happening with these shadow entities. They're in our bedrooms, and their field of energy, that because they have their energy too,
Mm-hmm.
is crossing with ours, and we're sensing them, we're sensing their presence. That's what's waking us up. And we wake up, we see the thing in our room. When we see a dark person in our room like that, we're usually first thing that comes to mind is intruder.
Yeah.
It's later on we start deducing, well, it was a shadow person or whatever. We're first immediately thinking there is an intruder. Our adrenaline starts rushing. Oh my God, now I can't move because I have the sleep paralysis thing going on. And so it just snowballs from there.
Interesting. That's a great way of describing it too. And a lot of people who can sense spirit and not see them, that's what they're picking up on as well. That
Exactly. Yes.
energetic field entering their energetic field, which is fun always. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today? Any bit of advice
Um,
or tidbit of information?
yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot within this field. But I would say, trust your instincts on a lot of this. If something doesn't feel right, if it feels off, trust that. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. I think there used to be a stigma a long time ago that if you talked about these things, if you heard voices, if you saw things, and you talked about that, then you were crazy. That's not the case anymore. We see this all over television these days. It's in all over social media. It's you know I think we've come a long way over the last 20-25 years in opening up and helping people realize you're not alone in this. Other people are experiencing these things. So don't be afraid to reach out for help in this. um I would also encourage people to visit the connecteduniverseportal.com, which is my new learning platform where we dive into a lot of these different topics.
Great. I was getting ready to ask you about that. Perfect.
Thank you.
How else can they reach you? How else can people
You
find you, Mike?
Yeah, connecteduniverseportal.com, shadowdimension.com, and then my personal website, mikericksecker.com. You can also find me all over, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those places. And
Awesome.
the YouTube channel as well, Haunted Road Media.
Perfect. Great. Mike, this has been awesome. What a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Liz. I absolutely appreciate it.
This has been great. I know our listeners are enjoying this. Awesome. And thank you everyone for listening. Again, this is Liz Peterson at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me at Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Raise the Vibe with Liz, and my website, Liz's Healing Touch. Have a great day, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Thanks, everyone.